I don't know what it's like to work at another company. I've always worked here. Outside of playing music, this is what I have done with my life starting at age 23.
I think Paul had it all figured out from the very beginning.
He did not grow up saying, one day I'm going to run Paul Reed Smith guitars, you know? He grew up and created Paul Reed Smith guitars. This is the beginning. This is the creation of this thing. It's not taking somebody else's dream and trying to manage it. It's, you know, the guy who had the dream is still here.
I think one of the things that makes us special or different as far as guitar building goes is it actually starts long before we are in our factory. The process starts with a tree growing in the forest, literally. And we're fairly particular about what the qualities are that go into the products that make up our guitars. One of the first things that I did when I came into PRS in late '85 was to help with wood selection and finding good neck wood and choosing tops and backs and that sort of thing, and getting all the materials ready to build a guitar. This is a very, very nice piece of quilted maple, and this will end up on one of our guitars, and as you stain the guitar, this curl or the figure that's in this top is going to explode, and it'll be very vibrant, and it really brings out the ultimate look that's inside of the wood. It also is a great sounding wood, so guitars they're a recipe. It's like making a dish or something. So it isn't one component, it's all those components in conjunction with one another that creates a tone that allows you to express your music.
You pick up a PRS, and in my opinion, it's a different experience than almost any other instrument that's out there. And that is because we're trying to make that guitar feel like something familiar to you, whether or not you've ever picked up a PRS or not. It does not feel like a new instrument. Definition new instrument, sterile, sharp, cold. Finish feels weird. Your hand doesn't move the way your hand should move on a guitar. It requires a break-in period, or it requires a setup, or it requires going to have a luthier do a once-over on the guitar to bring out what it could be out of it. We've already done that here.
After we've selected the wood and dried the wood, that's like the first part of the process. Now it gets into almost a painful thing. And the painful thing is if I had to, I could make a guitar neck inside of this factory in probably a day, maybe a little over 1 day. The reality is it takes us about a month to make a neck.
Periodically we'll have consultants come into our business. You know, industrial engineers have walked through here, and we'll walk them through our process. We'll say, what recommendations do you have for us? And they always go to our neck process and say, I can take this from 30 days down to 3 days. And we say, thank you very much, here's your check, we're not going to do that.
If you rush this process, you can have an instrument that looks like an instrument, might feel like an instrument, might even play like an instrument for an amount of time. But that guitar will always move on you. That neck is it's gonna detune, it's gonna go out of intonation, it's going to get humps in the fretboard, it's gonna buzz, it'll never stabilize, it'll never be quite right.
To make a good neck, you just have to take a little bit of meat off of a neck as you're carving it. It's gonna move, it's gonna settle down, you're gonna level where the fretboard is gonna go, you're gonna let it sit, the next day you're gonna cut a little more, it's gonna move, and you're gonna do that over and over again. Every time you make a cut, there's a little bit of movement, and you do that for a month. By the time you're through making your cuts, it's not moving anymore because it's done, and it's reached its equilibrium. And that is then you have a foundation to build a guitar off of.
The entire intention of this is to make sure that the guitar is stable for a lifetime. A lot of artists comment on, they'll have a show, they'll need a guitar, they'll call us up, they'll say, we need this thing at the venue tomorrow night, It's on an airplane, it's going up, it's coming down, it's getting abused by the airline. It lands at the venues and the guitar's in tune, and they can't believe it. And the reason that is because we're taking 30 days, not 1 day, to make a neck over on this side. Here's a spot that has not changed one bit in 30 years, and that is how we take a neck. Once we've gone through the process of building a neck and it's everything we want it to be, it has to be mated to the body, and it has to be done perfectly, really. And in a way, it doesn't really, it doesn't necessitate such a great glue joint, because glue is really there to help the joint, it's not to create the joint. So we're very, very carefully, first of all, make sure that the neck is fitting tightly in the body. And the second thing we're doing is making sure that the angle of the neck to the body is within a very, very tight tolerance, so that our bridge, when we set it up, that our bridge can be within a tight tolerance to the body. I've long held a theory that always let a machine do what a machine is good at, and never get a person to try and do that, and never try to get a machine to do something that a person has to do. And so a guitar builder has to set that neck. A guitar builder has to feel what that feels like as we're getting the neck heel to the pocket. It's not something that you can really do on a machine, it's a feel thing. So this is where a craftsman, and a craftsman with a great attention to detail comes into play.
I love making things. I'm a manufacturing guy, I guess you could say, at heart. And when I was sanding guitars, you know, it can be a thankless job, you know, sanding guitars and just doing that very manual labor day in and day out. But I loved it. I loved doing it because you're kind of a part of a deal. You're kind of a part of a movement in a way. And so just being a part of that scene is fun. I think Paul had it all figured out from the very beginning, but we didn't have the ability to execute 100% of what he had in his head. And over time, we just had the ability to bring more and more of his thoughts into it and make the guitar that he had inside of his mind. And you kind of have to go back to 1985 and remember what was going on to really understand what drove PRS into being, what drove Paul into doing what he was doing. Because what people referenced in the 80s, if they were going after a great tone in a guitar really, was generally speaking a vintage instrument, or what are now called vintage instruments. We called them used guitars. And so in a world, in a sea of graphic guitars and crazy neon colors and pictures and weird things that were going on instruments, here we come with a vintage yellow curly maple, you know, PRS custom, you know, which really was astoundingly different for a new company breaking on the scene.
A lot of people think about finish as just being paint, you know, just something that you put on top of something so that it is protected or it looks good. Finish has a sound, so you have to accept that for a second. The finished material that goes on a guitar has a sound, and it can affect the sound of the instrument dramatically. Finish that doesn't cure, particularly thick finish that doesn't cure on a guitar, is like a wet blanket, and it inhibits all the work that you put. If you buy the very best tone woods in the world and you go to extremes and process and drying that wood and curing that wood, it'll never be the instrument that it wants to be because you've laid a wet blanket over it. So we take the same amount of attention to detail into the finish operation as we do at the beginning in the wood shop. The things that are important is it has to be very clear, because we have this amazing wood that we have, and we've developed these really pretty amazing colors, and they're beautiful guitars, and if you put a cloudy finish over that, you've just lost your battle. The second thing is that it has to be very hard. So we have proprietary finishes that we have developed with chemical companies that make the finish. It lays out and it has good build and thickness, but it's also, it's sandable but not easily sandable, and it's very hard when it cures out. So it vibrates and it resonates and it does everything that you want the guitar to do. It has to be very thin, because the thicker the finish, the more of a damper you put on the guitar. Our base coat is 1.5 human hairs thick. That's what we do. it has all this depth that makes it look like it's an inch thick, but that is 1.5 human hairs of base coat that's on that guitar. It's protecting it, it's sealing it, it works well enough to where no moisture is going into the wood to affect it over time. But that's how thin it is, and it is extremely hard. So it resonates very, very well. Then we'll put our top coat on there, and that is 1 human hair. So you have 1.5 human hairs, and then you have 1 human hair, and that is what we call a good finish system. And it started with Paul 30 years ago, who said, if there's a better way to do it, I'm gonna do it. He was the guy that was the guitar builder, he was the repair guy. He fixed 1 million guitars, he knew what failed, he knew what didn't work well. And even before he knew he was going to have an animal that PRS Guitars has turned into, I think he was cataloging away, because that's the way he thinks. He was making a list in his mind of all the things that didn't work as well as he wanted them to work. And those are the things that we call proprietary now. This is Paul's patented Tremolo bridge. It was born just before the company was born. It's been revised a few times. We've learned things over the last 30 years, and so it's just gotten better and better and better, and we've learned about the transfer of tone and things that inhibit that transfer of tone. We know where to put plating and where not to put plating. We know what materials to make something out of. We know where high resonance and mid resonance has its best place in the soup, so to speak, and so we put them in the right spots. And so this in a way is an instrument in and of itself. This is a thing that's gone through R&D for 30 years now, and it's better than it ever was, and it works phenomenally. So if you look at these parts, can I grab one of these? You can see, you know, these are bases that these are not something you're going to order in a catalog. This is to our design. It's material that we call out. It has our name on it. The distance between that surface of that foot and that base plate is something that we're very particular about. It's all of these little details that go into a PRS, and that sound that you get is very singular with PRS because of our recipe and the proprietary nature of these parts. Whether you call it quality control or quality assurance, it's basically what people do to make sure that the instruments end up at the end of the line being what it is they want it to be. And for an awfully long time, everybody that built a guitar was in charge of making sure that they did a good job. Then in the process, the next person in line checked what you did. And we still do that. It's gotten a little more formalized here now. There is a quality assurance department, you know, we have engineering, we have things that we didn't have 30 years ago. Everybody that builds guitars here does have that sense of ownership and that sense of pride and that sense of being a part of quality control, because it takes accuracy, it takes a great design, and it takes caring of everybody that's in the process. We got 255 people that are every day coming in here saying, we're going to build the best guitar that we know how to build, and it's caring every step of that process that you're helping to make an instrument.
We're like a paintbrush company. We're making a tool for a musician, for that tool to work as well as it can work, so that whatever is in your head and in your heart can flow through your hands and make the sound that you imagined.